Naked and Free. That's how Susanna Hoffs recorded one of the Bangles' most popular songs in 1988.
Close your eyes, give me your hand.
In the 80s, girl bands were all the rage again, and the Bangles were one of the top bands around. They rocked the music scene for 8 years and dropped several iconic hits like Manic Monday, In Your Room, Walk Like an Egyptian, and Eternal Flame. Susanna, the band's lead vocalist and guitarist, stole the spotlight. The overwhelming focus on her eventually disrupted the group's dynamic, with the media treating the other members like mere backup. 6 months after the triumph of Eternal Flame, Susanna left the Bangles to pursue a solo career. Thus, one of the most successful bands of the 80s disbanded. So what exactly went down? Rumors say that Susanna recorded an entire album in the Nude and that one of the Bangles' biggest hits was inspired by Elvis Presley. But is there any truth to these stories? To find out, we need to travel back to the beginning of the Bangles. It was 1980, and Susanna Hoffs had just graduated with an art degree from the University of California. During college, she frequented record stores to relive the music of her childhood, falling in love with 60s bands. In the late 70s, she attended many iconic concerts and became deeply involved in the vibrant music scene of San Francisco. Before founding the Bangles, Susanna attempted to start a band with a childhood friend, but it didn't pan out. Determined to try again, she dove into the Los Angeles music scene, teaming with new wave, rockabilly, punk, hardcore, and pop-influenced bands from the 60s. In the early 80s, Los Angeles experienced a surge of young bands all inspired by the psychedelia of the 60s, each picking up different elements from that vibe. The result was a music scene called Paisley Underground, which captured bands that had unique sounds but somehow complemented each other, like Dream Syndicate and the Long Riders. Susanna loved a band called The Last, which had that 60s sound she was so fond of, and was also a fan of the Go-Go's, an all-girl band that was quite successful and inspired her to form her own female group. Susanna distributed flyers at a Go-Go's concert at the famous nightclub Whiskey A Go-Go and placed a classified ad looking for cool girls who loved the same bands as her. The only response came from bassist Annette Zilinskas, but 2 more members were needed. In her search, Susanna responded to an ad from Lynn Elkind, a guitarist who wanted to start her own band after leaving Those Girls, led by sisters Vicky and Debbie Peterson. Since she was roommates with the Petersons, Susanna ended up talking to Vicky. They hit it off, and Susanna invited her and her sister Debbie to her place. The chemistry was immediate, especially since they were all Beatles fans. Susanna played them a tape of her recordings, and they discovered they had the same musical tastes. That's how the Bangles started, initially under different names. The Colors, then the Supersonics Bangs, before finally settling on the Bangs. In the beginning, they organized their own shows in clubs and had to call venue owners to book slots. Everything changed when Miles Copeland, a major music industry manager, discovered the band and decided to manage them. Under his guidance, things started looking up, and they even recorded an album. However, right before its debut in 1982, a boy band with the same name demanded they change it or pay $40,000. To avoid legal issues, they switched from the Bangs to the Bangles within 48 hours. Vicky Peterson regretted the name change. It felt terrible. It was like having to change your personal name. We had built a following as the Bangs, and we had worked hard. We felt we were the Bangs, not something else. Due to the name change, their debut album was only released in January 1983 by a small label called Faulty Products, which went bankrupt while they were on tour. Despite this, the girls didn't give up and continued performing. One day, a representative from Columbia Records named Peter Philbin went to San Francisco specifically to see them perform. He was considering signing the band, one of the largest labels at the time. He even brought Bruce Springsteen to see the show and get his opinion. Bruce liked what he saw, and in March 1983, the girls signed with Columbia. That same year, bassist Annette Zilinskas left the band, replaced by Michael Steele, another renowned bassist who had just left another all-female band, the Runaways. Their first album with Columbia, All Over the Place, 1984, was well received by critics and had minor hits like Hero Takes a Fall and Going Down to Liverpool. The band gained more attention when Prince, under the pseudonym Christopher, wrote Manic Monday for them. In a recent interview with The Mirror, Susanna expressed her gratitude to Prince for this gift, describing him as extremely generous and regretting not staying in touch with him before his death. This single, released in 1986, boosted the success of their second album, Different Light, which also included hits like If She Knew What She Wants by Jules Shear and Walk Like an Egyptian by Liam Sternberg. Despite the success, not everything was perfect in the band. The Bangles had 4 members who wrote songs and wanted to be recognized for their own compositions. Guitarist Vicky Peterson wanted people to see the band as a true voice in music. After some time, the girls decided to take control of their musical production. On the album Everything, they chose not to use songs from others and wrote or co-wrote all the tracks. This decision led to hits like In Your Room and Eternal Flame, which Susanna helped write and became a classic. The song was co-authored by Billy Steinberg and Tom Kelly, who had written other hits like Madonna's Like a Virgin and Cyndi Lauper's True Colors. It was inspired by a story about Elvis Presley, specifically about a flame that was supposed to be burning at his burial site in Memphis. Susanna told Billy Steinberg that once the band was invited for a private tour at Graceland. While in the Garden of Memories, they saw a small box next to the grave that had gone out. That prompted Billy to comment, "Wow, Eternal Flame would make a good song title." Billy revealed in interviews that Susanna was envious of Cyndi Lauper's song Unconditional Love and wanted to write something similar for the Bangles. Her answer was Eternal Flame. Interestingly, she was so excited about this song that she carried a demo tape wherever she went and showed it to anyone who wanted to listen. But when it came time for the band to choose the songs that would be included on the Everything album, it was initially rejected, which left Susanna devastated. During the recordings, the producer David Sigerson gave the song another chance and suggested a new arrangement with the keyboard. When the band saw the result, they finally decided to include it on the album. Still, during the recordings, David even joked that Olivia Newton-John sang better naked, and this inspired Susanna to try recording that way too. She found it liberating, and it ended up becoming a superstition of hers during the album's production. Eternal Flame was a huge success, reaching number 1 in 9 countries, including the UK and the US. Despite the success, relations within the Bangles began to sour. After Eternal Flame became a huge hit, the way the public saw the band changed, with the media portraying the Bangles as if it were just Susanna with a backup band, rather than a united group. This idea that she was the leader may have arisen because although the other members had written and sung songs at some point, many of the hits were linked to Susanna. In addition, she was often the highlight in photos, being beautiful and shorter than the rest of the group. Debbie Peterson commented that the connection between them was gradually weakening, and she thinks this happened in part because they always chose songs written by other people or that only had Susanna singing. In an interview for the Herald Sun in 2005, Susanna also said that the nearly 10 years of the Bangles were spent between studios and relentless tours. This pace ended up contributing to the band's breakup in 1989. Susanna Hoffs pursued a solo career, released some albums and minor hits, but nothing that compared to the Bangles. Vicky Peterson joined some groups like the Continental Drifters, a rock band formed by stars, which she led with Susan Cowsill. Debbie Peterson formed her own band and also worked with Gina Schock, former drummer of the Go-Go's. Michael Steele did some studio work. Fortunately, almost a decade after the band's breakup, they still kept in touch. Susanna and Debbie began to think about reuniting the band again. The perfect opportunity arose when they decided to record the song Get the Girl for the soundtrack of the movie Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, directed by Susanna's husband Jay Roach. After this experience, they began to consider performing live shows. They tested the idea with smaller performances in Los Angeles, and it felt so natural that the band felt as if it had never separated, marking a kind of rebirth. Vicki Peterson, initially reluctant, described the experience as something very necessary and revitalizing in her life. In 2000, the Bangles returned to touring the world. In 2003, they released their fourth studio album, Doll Revolution, which was quite successful and had a single that reached #1 in Germany called Something That You Said. In 2007, they released a DVD of a live show, Return to Bangleonia. Even with the departure of Michael Mickey Steele from the band in 2005, they continued their world tours, with the help of guest bassists such as Annette Zalinskas, who had already played with them in the early 80s. In 2011, Debbie, Vicki, and Susanna released their fifth studio album, Sweetheart of the Sun. In 2014, they released a compilation of rarities from the 80s called Ladies and Gentlemen, The Bangles. And in 2019, they joined with other bands to release a cover album called 3x4. Even with their members now in their 60s, the Bangles still tour today. Currently, Susanna Hoffs, at 65, is living a dream. Encouraged by her son Jackson, she finally put her passion for writing into practice, which resulted in the publication of her first novel in April 2023. Susanna told American Songwriter in 2022 that after college, when she started trying to do something for herself, it was always passion that drove her. She said, "If it weren't for that, I would never have advertised in the newspaper looking for colleagues to form a band after graduating from Berkeley, and so I would never have met Vicki and Debbie Peterson, and the Bangles would not have existed." If you liked today's video and have something to add about the history of the girls from the Bangles, leave it here in the comments. Also, leave your like, this way you encourage us to continue to produce content like this.